Good morning, everybody. Good Erev Shabbos. There are many minhagim related to davening, and most of them do have a basis in halacha, although, excuse me, not everybody might be aware of all of them. I recall just about 2 weeks ago, after davening, we have this 1 minute halacha, and the quick halacha was that if you scratch yourself, if you touch your nose or your mouth or your hair, you have to wash your hands, which most people are kind of lax about. And I remember many years ago, the old time shuls on the Lower East Side, on the bima, where not the bima, the stender where the shliach tzibur would daven, there was always a glass of water. Not in case the chazan got thirsty, but if he scratched himself or touched himself, he could dip his fingers in the water. It's a bygone minhag that nobody sees anymore. I don't think I haven't seen it in the past 60 years anywhere in any shul, but it's based on halacha. A similar interesting minhag concerns right before Shemona Esrei, when the chazan comes to the bracha of Ga'al Yisrael. In many places, the chazan doesn't say it. It's in an Baruch Atah, and he quiet. He doesn't finish the bracha out loud. So I want to discuss what the halacha is for a shliach tzibur who is getting to that bracha. Do you recite it out loud? Is one question. Question number two: do you answer amen to that bracha? Because it might be considered an interruption, a hefsek, between the Birchas Kriya Shema and Shemona Esrei. So this is the halachic discussion. The Shulchan Aruch states very clearly, you do not recite Amen. If the Shliach Tzibur says the bracha out loud, Baruch atah Hashem Ga'al Yisrael, the Shulchan Aruch says very clearly, do not recite Amen, because that's a hefsek. It's an interruption, because there has to be a smooth connection between Birchas Kriya Shema and the Shemona Esrei, and no interruption of any sort are allowed. Therefore, you can't answer amen, and therefore the minhag arose of the shliach tzibur not reciting the bracha out loud. Baruch, or when he gets to the end, quiet. The Ramah, who quotes the halach for Ashkenazi Jews, says there are those who say yesh omrim, that you do say amen, and our minhag is to say amen. So clearly now you have two distinct minhagim. One minhag comes up to the Shemona Esrei and says Ga'al Yisrael silently, so you can't answer amen. And the second minhag is, no, you say it out loud and you do answer amen. The Mishnah Berurah explains that the Ramah is of the opinion that Ga'al Yisrael is the end of Kriya Shema, the end of Birchas Kriya Shema, and therefore answering amen is not considered a prohibited interruption, a hefsek, and there's no problem. Therefore, it becomes obligatory, necessary to say amen. However, how do you deal with the Shulchan Aruch is not a minor authority either. So how do you navigate between these two major poskim? So the Mishnah Berurah offers several solutions. The first suggestion, and the preferred method according to the Mishnah Berurah, is that everybody should try to conclude their own bracha of Ga'al Yisrael together, simultaneously with the Chazan, and start the Shemona Esrei at the same time. And therefore, if you're saying Ga'al Yisrael, and the Shliach Tzibur is saying Ga'al Yisrael, there's no need to say Amen, because you're saying the same bracha. And you can't say amen to your own bracha. Therefore, you just finish Ga'al Yisrael with the Shliach Tzibur and go right to Shemona Esrei. That's one suggestion, which many people follow today, which is the preferable suggestion or solution according to the Mishnah Berurah. The second suggestion is for the congregation to speed up their davening a little bit to get to Ga'al Yisrael before the Shliach Tzibur, and then start your Shmona Esrei for a few seconds before the Shliach Tzibor does. And therefore, since you're in the middle of saying Shmona Esrei, you can't interrupt it by saying Amen. That's the second suggestion. Again, the first suggestion, I think, is more commonly the one that is more commonly practiced. And therefore, the custom arose of saying Ga'al Yisrael silently in order to avoid the issue altogether. Not everybody might be learned enough to know the various options available. And to solve the issue of answering Amen, you can't answer Amen to a bracha that you can't hear. So that's where the minhag arose of saying this bracha silently. And this is a very, very widespread minhag that's quoted in many, many svarim. Yet, many authorities reject this practice. Rav Henkin, who was the 20th century Gadol before Rav Moshe, he says very clearly that the minhag of saying Gal Yisrael quietly is actually against the halacha, he says. Because he goes on, but basically he says that today, since everybody knows how to daven today, everybody reads Hebrew, and therefore you have to say the bracha out loud. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach agrees with him. And again, the Amen issue is resolved by saying Amen at the same time as the Shliach Tzibor or starting Shmona Esrei earlier. But not saying Ga'al Yisrael out loud is apparently wrong, according to many, many poskim. And then, again, there are different quotations of different rabbanim, what their practice is. Most of them hold that you should not finish Ga'al Yisrael silently. So if you have the opportunity to be a Shliach Tzibor, say Ga'al Yisrael out loud, and hopefully the people will either say it with you or have started Shmona Esrei already. However, be aware that Qassam Sofer and a few other Hasidic rabbanim, the Munkacher, are not always in agreement with that, and that's why you have all these different minhagim. But clearly, the preponderance of opinion, of halachic opinion, is that regardless of what you do privately, whether you finish with the Shliach Tzibor or whether you finish before the Shliach Tzibor, to obviate the need to say Amen, everybody, I would say, vast majority of reliable poskim would hold that if you're davening for the Amid, say Ga'al Yisrael out loud. Even though in some places they still don't do this, and because people really don't know the halacha. And we should train people not to say Amen, but to finish Ga'al Yisrael with the Shliach Tzibor. And Rav Sternbach says that you teach this in yeshivos and in day schools where people get educated. Unfortunately, and I've spoken about this before, we don't teach enough about prayer in our schools. You can learn the Siddur the same way you learn a piece of Gemara. You learn the halachos of davening, which unfortunately we don't do as often as we should. And that is why certain minhagim become so entrenched, even though they are inaccurate. But these minhagim elicit resistance and even stubbornness to change because they've been doing it for so long. And when you're doing something for a long period of time, it becomes ingrained in you. And we know in general, the same thing is true about diets and smoking. It's very hard to change old habits. But the halacha, unfortunately, or fortunately, is dominant here. And the halacha would require us to follow certain rules. And those rules are, regardless of whether you finish with the Shliach Tzibor or finish before the Shliach Tzibor, the Shliach Tzibor himself should recite Ga'al Yisrael out loud. And that's the source of that particular minhag. Any questions, comments, critiques? Okay.
I just have a question, though.
Sure.
Line that you had said about, that you've said this before, that teach enough about the actual praying, and even maybe the do's and don'ts, when you stand, when your feet should be together, all of that in yeshivas. It just seems like so many people are on autopilot, and I wonder if that's ever been discussed at some group of rabbis that are principals of yeshivas or leaders in communities. It really is chaval, that you just, as I said, it seems like kids are just being taught to run on autopilot.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the system has produced people who daven by rote without any understanding. And it has not been discussed often enough, and even if it has been discussed, nothing's been done about it. I often point to the first rabbi of what's the shul Teaneck, Rabbi Rothwax's
Beth Aaron.
Beth Aaron. The first rabbi at Beth Aaron. Beth Aaron started an optician's office. I helped set up the chairs there on Friday afternoon. Rabbi Fass, Oliver Shalom, classmate of mine. It was a wonderful one. He was a chemist. He didn't take a salary. He was the first rabbi. And all he spoke about, all he talked about for the first 2 years that he was there was the siddur and davening. That's all. Every shiur, every dvar Torah was about davening, and that is why many of the minhagim of that shul today are based on what he taught. He made it a point. Unfortunately, most other rabbis don't talk about it enough, and in the schools they don't talk about it enough. When I was a principal, we had a graded class in every year in Be'er Tefillah from first grade through eighth grade. And they learned about the siddur. And we talked about it. Unfortunately, it didn't continue after I left. And most schools do not teach about it. Again, I understand there are so many things to teach, and there are so many hours in the day, and how do you prioritize? But I would think that's something that people are going to be doing for the rest of their lives should be a priority. So you'll learn one Rashi less. So you'll learn one Perek less of Navi. You'll learn one Mishnah less. But at least you'll learn how to daven. You know what it means. You'll have a connection to the siddur. It's lost. And it's sad because the one thing, look, there are many, many day school graduates in our community. And they daven. They may not learn every day. They may not be involved in other things that they should be doing as B'nai Torah, but they do daven. Maybe they'll miss a mincha or a marif here and there, but they come to shul on Shabbos and they daven. Do they know what they're saying? Do they know about the siddur, the history of the siddur, the halachos? No. Which is why you have so much talking in shul.
Dr. Greene.
Yes.
I was in a shul, in Bergen County a couple of weeks ago, and it was in the morning, 6 o'clock or 6:30 minyan. I couldn't believe the speed. 20 minutes, finish Shmon Esrei. I said to them, "Did you catch the flight?" It was unbelievable how they're meticulous to say, to at least try to say every word, but it's that's what it sounds like. And you can't daven. I'd rather not daven with that minyan than daven there. It's embarrassing to daven with that minyan.
You're
and
right.
That is many minyanim in the morning are like that. Many places.
You are 100% correct. And a number of years ago, we used to have a 6 o'clock minyan where it was the same issue. One particular about tefillah, he would finish, you say, in 20 minutes. And that 6 o'clock minyan was known. The people would just fly through. I davened there once. That was it. I couldn't go back again. Even though I needed to be someplace early in the morning, I couldn't go to that minyan because I can't daven there. It just runs. It's wrong.
But
it's
on the other hand, Rabbi, you did once, at least once before, regarding tirchat tzibur, that some people that like drag out the davening also a tircha.
Yeah, there's a happy medium. There is a happy medium in between. I've often told the story. About this a typical shul yid who went to shul every day of his life, who dies, goes to heaven, and one of the gatekeepers there says, God wants to see you. Me? Who am I? A Pashut Yid? So he's ushered into God's presence, and he's facing, and God's back is to him. And he's sitting there, and he hears a murmuring sound. He doesn't know what to make of it. Finally, God in his radiance turns around and faces this Jew and says to him, and the Jew says, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, that's how you've been davening to speaking to me for the past 60, 70 years. How am I supposed to understand you? And it's true. You listen to how some people daven and fly through, Be'er Tefillah, just simply understanding the words, just the words themselves. Forget about Perushim and other meanings and symbolism. Just a simple, that's why the interlinear siddur is so important. It gives you a line-by-line translation, almost word by word. You daven slowly, so it's better to daven less and know what you're saying than to daven more and have no idea what you're saying, in my opinion. Not everybody might agree with that, but
you just left it there.
Wally?
This is an issue. Yes.
Wally?
Yes.
Okay, can I say something?
Absolutely.
My feeling is very often here in shul by us, at least in my opinion, the Baal Tefillah davens too fast. Okay, and it's all the Baal Chazan, the Baal Tefillah has to do is take 2 or 3 or 4 minutes longer to daven, and it would be perfect. And it wouldn't be a tirch on anybody. It wouldn't be one of these dragged out minyanim. It would be the proper thing. Because to me, many Baal Tefillah, when they get up there, they, in my opinion, they don't say, when there's a long paragraph like a hodu, okay, they must eye the tefillos and not say the words, because I can't follow them. And then when it comes to Valatzion, the same thing.
You have no argument. You have no argument.
Extra minutes, and it would be fine.
Many years ago, I showed the rabbi a little pamphlet from a shul in Israel, and this shul had it was a booklet of guidelines for the Shliach Tzibur.
Wow.
And they described the various minhagim of davening during the year, but it also said the pace has to be a certain amount, how many minutes to get from here to here. It has to be slow. And in general, the whole idea of putting into writing what is appropriate, and also who you choose to be a Shliach Tzibur, it comes down to the issue of standards. And that's something that I think are lacking. Not everybody who has a yortzeit should be allowed to get up to daven. Forget about yortzeits. The person who's a shliach tzibur is the representative of the tzibur, and he has to be the person that leads the davening in an appropriate way. And if a guy can't read or a guy goes too fast, I'm sorry. I hate to hurt your feelings, but you're not going to daven this morning or this afternoon or this evening. And perhaps start a petition and give it to the rabbi, and maybe we'll see some action here. I don't know how to change what goes on, but it isn't just in our shul. It's in many shuls. I won't say every shul, but it's in many shuls where speed it seems to be the more important than accuracy or understanding of what you're saying. And I
Okay,
doubt very much if most people really understand what it is that they're saying. So that's a whole other parsha. But in any event,
hey,
Wally,
Dr. Green,
yes.
there is some hope on the horizon, and it comes from, of all places, Tisha B'Av. Because if you see the trend in the last 10, 15 years of not saying every kina, but talking about it and teaching it and saying a selection, that's what we need to do with Shacharis, especially on Shabbos and even during the week. Now, talking about a few of the halalukas or two of them, and explaining and not davening every single thing. That's what has to start. The same thing we do by kinos, and we have to do it by slichos, or else the tefillos have become meaningless for the most part. And that's what is essential.
I second the motion. Although I will say, I mean, the Tisha B'Av was very nice because we took our time. We went through the keynotes. But if you noticed, in the beginning of the keynotes, the shul was pretty full. By the time we got to 11:30 already, it wasn't that full anymore. People weren't sitting around. But
That's human nature.
I agree that time should be spent daven less, but daven better, and understand what it is you're saying. And now this has to be discussed with the rabbi. There used to be 50 years ago a ritual committee in Shomrei Torah. That hasn't existed for a long, long time. Maybe it's time to reinstate the ritual committee to put together certain recommendations for the rabbi to enforce.
And what they have in Brooklyn, I've seen it. I'm sure they have it in Passaic. They have a time chart that you start at 7 o'clock, that at 7:08 is Mizmar Shiur, 7:20 is Yishtabach, and you cannot veer from that or else you're not davening again.
All right.
So they need a time, they need the schedule of how to do the clock. You need that. That's a standard.
Bring it up to the rabbi. I would certainly endorse that. I would certainly endorse that. It's obviously, I've touched a nerve here, and it's a very important issue, one that I feel very strongly about. But so far, nothing has happened. Maybe if enough people raise the issue, maybe something will happen.
Wally,
you got your homework. Yeah.
I think we have a similar situation before Shema. With the bracha, I'm not answering Amen there also, but I think for a different reason.
Ohev Amo Yisrael, yes.
Yeah, like you don't say, oh, because you don't know what type of bracha that is.
Well, again, so that's why you try to conclude.
You try to say it with the chazan.
Correct, to avoid the problem of answering.
And another question is, let's assume I'm saying Baruch Shamar, and I come to make the bracha at the end of Baruch Shamar, but the chazan's saying the bracha at the same time. And I want to say answer Amen. And if we finish at the same time, can I answer Amen to the bracha, or should I pause and let him say the bracha and then answer Amen?
Well,
and then finish the bracha.
You can't answer Amen to your own bracha. So either if you finish at the same time with him, then you wouldn't answer Amen. If you daven a little slower and you hear him say it, you can say Amen.
And then finish the bracha by yourself.
Yeah. Same time.
That's why I think very much that the Baal Tefillah has to know these things and has to practice these things. The Baal Tefillah has to know that when it comes to Baruch Shamar, he has to allow the Kahal to finish their Tishbachos, and he should say Baruch Shamar a little bit slower to allow the Kahal to do it. The same way sometimes when the Chazan gets up there and he says Aleinu or Shir Shalayom, he says it so fast, he doesn't allow the person who's saying Kaddish to even get to the point sometimes.
This is a big problem, Elaine. I can tell you, I remember it very, very clearly. In 1969, I asked my Rebbe, I wrote him a question, and I said, this very question, said, how can people say Kaddish when they can't finish Aleinu in time? Because they rush through it so quickly. It's a big problem, and the poskim addressed this issue. Aleinu is a very important tefillah. It comes from the Yomim Noraim, and we have to say it slowly and meaningfully. And I know when I'm saying Kaddish that I have to start saying Aleinu earlier in order to finish in time to say Kaddish, because whoever's davening there goes, he goes too fast.
Exactly. That's exactly my point.
I don't know how people can daven that quickly.
Wally,
Yes.
if the Gabbai does a good job this morning at the 8 o'clock Greene meeting in Teaneck, the Gabbai, if someone goes in, the sky isn't even flying. If he goes even a second too fast, he slows him down automatically.
Okay.
That's his job. He's just a member of the shul, but he's a Gabbai for that minyan, and he does an excellent job.
How does he slow him down?
He just walks over them and says, don't start the next tefillah. He makes sure he slows him down and doesn't run to the next tefillah until he knows that everybody finished, that everybody said Kaddish and everybody has. And the minyan is not that long. It's not any longer, but at least everybody has their chance at daven. And he does a great job.
So these are all excellent suggestions, and we have to bring it up to the leadership to make it happen. So if our little discussion this morning is helpful in that direction, I will feel very vindicated.
But the Rabbanim have to learn this, and the principals of the yeshivas have to enforce this. Because I had my 7 years that I was up at a Shiur as a general studies principal, and I could tell you that the goal, and they were much better than other places, but the goal of the Rabbanim is, and the principles is, to see how much blot Gemara they can teach and they'll learn, etc. Learning should not be at the expense of tefillah. As a matter of fact, they should teach tefillah the same way we should have in shul, instead of always talking about the pasha. Once a month, talk about tefillah and how to daven properly. And maybe then the Baal Tefillah will get up there and daven properly. Because the goal is not to rush so you can get to Kiddush and fly through Musaf, and not to rush to Kriyas Torah so you can get to Kiddush earlier, but so you can get to Kiddush earlier so you can get home, so you can go to Perek in the park, so you can get all this learning in and get back in time for a shiur beforehand.
I think,
what are you learning for? You have to learn how to. Don't you learn how to daven? Yes, you do learn how to daven, but people ignore that.
Milty, I think you should write an article for the Jewish Link about it. Exactly what you said.
And I tell you what else they do in yeshivas. Very often they daven mincha right after lunch, and right after that, to have a 15-minute break so the kids could have recess. So obviously, what do the kids want to do? They want to rush through mincha so they have more time for recess. And that is the fault of the yeshivot.
I don't argue with you. I agree 100%. I think you should write an article about it. I've written a few. Go for it. You're 100% correct.
But who's going to listen to me? I'm an old man.
As they say, dort link der Hund begraben. That's exactly the problem.
Right.
That's exactly the problem. Well, if enough people raise the issue, maybe somebody will listen. Maybe. Get a petition started and bring it to the rabbi. Maybe that'll help.
Right.
It's a shame that you have to do that. But that's another problem. In any event, have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody.
Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Daven well.
Thank you, Wally. Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
Thank you all.